Hello there guys, RMP792 here. Right. It's been a busy week. My grandfather is still in hospital, unfortunately, and I'll freely admit I'm kind of running myself ragged at the moment. But it's family. It's things you do for family. But anyway, so I don't have time to record any proper gameplay footage this morning. I'll be doing my best to get some recorded over the course of this week. I've already picked out what I'm planning to do. But yeah, because I'm literally recording this in the half hour or so before I have to leave. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a bit of a weird week. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I got a message on Twitter this morning from probably my most loyal follower, or at least certainly the one who comments an awful lot, basically asking what my opinions were on the whole topic of Brexit. To which my response was way too long-winded and complicated for a tweet, so I'll try and do a vlog on it. So, yeah, I'm going to give some background on the idea of Brexit for anyone who's not in Britain or who doesn't know about it, and then I'll actually give my thoughts on it. So, Brexit is the utterly awful term that has been applied to the idea of Britain leaving the European Union. So, Britain's exit, Brexit, it's... ugh. Yes, the term really pisses me off. But anyway, that's not the important thing. So, how did we get here? Well, short version, a while back there was a party formed called the United Kingdom Independence Party, which basically argued that the reason everything in Britain sucks is because we're members of the European Union. And their argument, their leader is a man named Nigel Farage, and they got a reasonable number of votes at the last election. They've only got one sitting MP, which is largely because our political system is broken badly. But yeah, so they did get a reasonable voter turnout, and part of the way that the Conservatives managed to hang on to a lot of the people who would otherwise have voted for UKIP was by promising we would have a referendum on whether or not we actually wanted to remain part of the European Union. And yeah, that's what we're doing. We are having a referendum. It's this Thursday, because our elections are always on a Thursday, or our major votes are always on a Thursday for some reason. Don't know why, that's just the way it is. Yeah, so I'll be honest, I've been contemplating doing this particular vlog for quite a while, but I've been putting it off on the grounds that I'm not a politics channel, I'm a video game channel, but screw it. So, I was asked, I'd been thinking about it, it all kind of came together, and I thought, what the hey, I might as well do it. So, my thoughts on the potential exit of Britain from the European Union. It would be a massive, massive mistake. Here's the thing. There is this common belief among people that the problems they have are somebody else's fault. Now, in some cases that's true. In a lot of cases it's not. And there has been this big drive by a lot of the papers, especially the ones owned by Rupert Murdoch, to basically blame all of Britain's problems on immigrants. Why is the NHS stretched beyond belief? Immigrants. Why can you not get a council house anymore? Immigrants are getting all the council houses. Why are we so scared of terrorists? Well, it's all those immigrants who are going to be terrorists. Here's the thing. The answer to a lot of the above questions, the answer is not immigrants. Why are there not enough council houses? Because the Conservatives haven't been building them. In fact, the Labour government before them wasn't building enough of them either. So that's just generally London being crap. And I appreciate exactly how that sounds, but there are some places where you've got to put the why is the NHS stretched beyond belief? Because it's had its budget massively slashed. And here's the thing, the NHS is the single greatest thing that I think the British government ever put together, because it is still, despite the problems with it, it is still the best in the world. cheapest cost per patient, best results per patient. We don't have to deal with any. Let's face it, my mother actually works for the NHS's IT department, and she was at a conference quite a few years ago now with some Americans. It was over in America, and their comment to her was that something like 60% of their computing power is given over to billing. Yeah, I'm sorry, America, your healthcare system is broken badly, but that's not what I'm talking about. But the focus really has been on blaming immigrants for all our problems. Because if you blame them, you don't have to admit it's your problem and you don't have to fix it. But, if you actually look at the statistics, immigrants have been, generally speaking, a net gain for this country. They put more money in than they take out. They pay more in taxes than they take in benefits. There are actually a greater number of immigrants working for the NHS than getting stuff out of it. That's not a joke. That's actually true. But the problem is they are too easy a stick to use. I really don't want to have to use the Nazi comparison, but I'm going to have to. Damn you, Godwin. If you're not aware, Godwin's law states that the longer an argument goes on the internet, well, a longer an argument in general goes on, it's particularly true of the internet, the more likely it is that somebody will mention either Hitler or the Nazis. But UKIP have been making it so easy recently. I mean, there was a poster that Nigel Farage unveiled last week that you can look at it, and then you can look at actual Nazi propaganda. Basically the same image. It's a load of people, basically fleeing, horrible, horrible things, and pointing at them and going, "Oh God, we don't want them coming here. They're filthy. They might be trying to take our jobs and kill us." And I've got to be honest, this debate, for want of a better phrase, is bringing out the worst in this nation. Last week, one of our MPs was murdered. Sorry, police car outside. And here's the thing, that has not happened in a very long time. In fact, I don't think it's happened in my lifetime. The last time that a British MP was murdered was during the Irish Troubles, which were primarily before my time. There was still a little bit when I was a kid, but so long ago that I don't remember it at all. And she was murdered by a member of a group called Britain First, who are they claim to be a political group and all that stuff. They are basically a bunch of white, bigoted morons whose argument is that brown people are ruining everything for them. And let's face it, when the guy was arraigned in court, he was asked his name, and he literally said, "My name is Death to Traitors," and it really is bringing out the worst in people. And regardless of what your views on the EU are, is the EU flawed? Of course the EU is flawed. It's a system built by people. Because people suck. I'm sorry to say it, but people really, really suck. And we hate taking responsibility for our own actions and our own problems. We love to shift the blame onto somebody else. For the Nazis, shifted the blame onto the Jews. Actually, throughout most of history, it was shift the blame onto the Jews. Great Fire of London happened. Was that due to the fact that London was a big wooden city where all the buildings were too crowded together? No, of course not. It was probably started by some Jews. That's not a joke. As in, one of the beliefs at the time about the Great Fire of London was that it was probably started by some Jews. They have been a very persecuted group throughout history, and at the moment, the go-to things are immigrants from anywhere that's not here, basically. But it amazes me whenever you see people claiming that immigration is a bad thing. But this was my personal favourite of the "what the hell are you talking about" arguments, was that if we allow too many immigrants to come over, we're going to lose our great British things like curry houses. That was actually said in a serious political debate on what was it? Wasn't Newsnight. It was a fairly serious interview, and you're just looking at him going, curry houses. You mean the curry houses that were built by Indian immigrants? What? There has been no logical, coherent argument to any part of the Leave campaign. And let me talk for a moment about the people who are really pushing the Leave campaign. The three big people in it are Boris Johnson, who was not backing it until about 8-9 months ago, somewhere around that region, which is about the time he realised that it was the perfect lever with which to get rid of our current Prime Minister and take over his job. Yeah, Boris Johnson is a political opportunist who doesn't care about it, he just sees it as a way to get the top job. In fact, before that point, he was arguing the other direction. He was arguing we would be better to stay in Europe. Then there's Michael Gove. Now, I don't think this is the only reason, but it is kind of important to note that Michael Gove is, among other things, or I can't remember if he still is or not, but he certainly was our secretary for, I can't remember what his official title is, but for basically he was in charge of the benefit system, which is making sure that people who don't have enough get enough to survive. He's currently being investigated by the EU for human rights violations for the changes he made to disability living allowance, which they've basically said are violations of disabled people's human rights, to the point where there has been a marked increase in suicides and various other deaths, which are almost certainly directly related to these poor people having their benefits cut. And if we leave the EU, they can no longer do anything about him. So I'm not saying that's the only reason he's backing it, but it's probably a factor. And that really should get talked about more. And the last one is Nigel Farage, who is a fascist. This is not a joke. He is an actual bona fide fascist. As in, there was some documents recently got released, which was actually a report about him from his school days, where his headmaster, or might have just been one of his teachers, anyway, noted a worrying degree of fascism in him, and this is when he was a kid. This is the man who argues that, who is a sitting MEP, he's a member of the European Parliament, who has turned up to basically no votes. He has turned up to literally the minimum number to get his paycheck. And he argues that, the EU shouldn't do this, the EU shouldn't do that. And in every case where he's talking about a particular issue, he missed a vote relating to that issue. You can call that protesting if you want, but that is a man who is taking shameless advantage of the system, and I do not know why the hell anyone listens to him. Look, guys, our potentially exiting the EU is terrifying to me, because that would show that the worst instincts of human beings have won. And here's the thing, there are potential arguments against the European Union. Of course there are. But nobody in the Leave campaign is using any of them. All they're doing is banging the whole, immigrants, this, that. One of the big things they like to harp on about is the fact that we send 350 million quid a week to the EU, which is true. What is not true is that all that money just sits in some big EU bank account and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. No, the sheer number of subsidies we get from the EU damn near cancels that out. I'm not even kidding. Once you factor in subsidies for arts, subsidies for farmers, subsidies for all sorts of things, almost all of that money comes right back to us. Yeah. And by managing it centrally, they actually manage to save on on administration costs and things like that. So yes, it's actually a good thing. Oh boy. And the argument, one of the arguments that have been thrown around is that, if we didn't have to send that money to the EU, we could spend it all on the NHS. Ha! No. I'm sorry, last week, the FTSE 100 dropped massively. Literally a couple of, literally billions of pounds, just vanished from the British economy, and that's almost entirely down to fears that we're going to leave the EU, because trade deals negotiated through the EU, all these kinds of other things. We need this stuff. And the idea that we can just leave the EU, then renegotiate it all ourselves and everything will be fine and better, is nonsense. Because here's the thing, and this is going to be a very hard pill for some people in Britain to swallow. We are not important. Not in the least. Here's the thing, 100 years ago, very important, very big power. 100 years before that, massively important, massive power, very big player on the global stage. Today, no, our time has passed. We are no longer the British Empire. We are just a small island nation. A lot of people think we are the biggest economic contributor to the EU. We're not even top 3. We are behind Germany, we are behind... Who the hell else are we behind? I can't even remember the list, but we are not even top 3, because in the grand scheme of things, we're just not that important. It's a hard pill to swallow, to realise that history has passed you by, your time has gone. But here's the thing. Europe, as a global power, is a thing. Now, while the European Union is a socio-economic alliance, it's not a military alliance, it is absolutely true to say that the European Union can do some fairly impressive things when it pulls all its might, economically speaking. Economically speaking, the European Union has a power that's, very nearly up there with the USA and China. Because, ultimately, it's a lot of relatively small nations working together for a greater common purpose. And here's the thing. That is when human beings get better. Throughout history, human beings have been divisive. We love to fight amongst ourselves. We like to find the little differences that divide us from each other and focus on those rather than the things that bind us together. Whether that's, you have a different religion to me, so I hate you. You have a different skin colour to me, so I hate you. You have different sexual organs to me, so I'm going to look down on you. But human beings can do amazing things when we work together. Here's the thing. America. In the 1960s, you performed what I still maintain is probably the single greatest feat humanity has ever achieved. And that's the moon landing. And do you want to know who made that possible? A German scientist. A man who was evacuated after the war and was put to work because he was a genius. And without him, your space program would never have got off the ground. Make no mistake about that. Let's face it, I did a fairly substantial chunk of my final year project on space. In fact, my final year project was officially titled Rocket to the Stars. So I actually did delve into the history. In fact, I delved into it a lot more than I should have, and I ended up having to rewrite it because it was meant to be a maths project, not a history project. But that was me. And without immigrants, without people moving around, interacting, communities become insular. And communities that become insular fail. There is this idea that, we don't want them coming over here because that they'll change our culture. All cultures change. And change is scary. But the world, cultures that do not change stagnate, and cultures that stagnate fail. The world is a big, big place. And ultimately, we can achieve great things if we work together. If we could stop pissing around, if we could stop fighting each other, if we could stop trying to outdo each other, we could actually achieve a hell of a lot more than we currently do. Is it going to happen? No, of course it isn't, because we're human beings, and human beings suck. But it's only the moment when you accept that as a fact that you have a chance of making anything better. You cannot change until you accept that you are flawed. And that's the big problem. People do not want to admit that. People want to think that Britain at the moment is great and perfect, and if we stop letting in people, then everything will be better. But that's not the case. Solving problems is hard. There is never an easy solution. And searching for one in the form of blaming somebody else for your problems is not the way to go about it. Britain, I'm scared. I am honestly worried about the outcome of this referendum. Because, statistically speaking, the older generation are much more likely to vote out, and my generation is much more likely to vote in. And here's the thing. If you're part of the older generation, you're going to die soon, relatively speaking. And my generation, and the generation below that, and the generation below that, are going to have to live with the consequences of your actions. Don't make a mistake that your children and your grandchildren will end up paying for out of fear of the other, out of fear of the stranger, out of fear of the person you do not know. Because most of them are people. And most of them are people exactly like you. They may speak a different language, they may serve a different religion, they may have a different skin colour, but they are all people. They all have hearts, they all have minds, and they all have souls. And together we can genuinely be a wonderful, wonderful force for this world. Or we can let hate and fear trample us under its boot. Right, that's enough preaching, I think. So, thank you very much for watching this. If you're British, please vote on Thursday, and for the love of God, don't vote for Leave. Because for one thing, I could not take the look of smug satisfaction on that bastard Farage's face. Until my next video, which I'll try and make a little less political, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.